Hello, welcome to Julie's Unknown Podcast. I had decided to take a little bit of a break from creating some episodes, but I think this is going to be the plan. I'll see what happens, but batching them in groups of 7 and, having 7 put up, or then taking a little break and then another 7, just because I realized that my inspiration for coming on here and chatting about whatever I want to chat about, it doesn't happen all the time, right? And that's just normal. I think many of you can relate to this, that I'm not always on. Like, I can't just always come up here and try to force and think of something to talk about when I don't feel inspired, or when life is so chaotic and I don't have time. And it feeling frazzled, because that energy, all those types of energies, is going to come through on the podcast. And I don't want that. I want to come from a place of excitement. I want to come from a place of wanting to share with you what I have to speak about. And so today's topic, I do want to talk about a little bit about vision and goals and my journey through vision and goals, and how that has shifted and changed over time from when I first started doing vision and goals, and where did that first start? Where did I first come across it? How did I do it initially? And then now, how do I navigate it? Because if you are listening to it, we do have the Lionsgate portal coming up on August 8th. So this is a really, really good time to put in some manifestations if you desire. And I do have, it's kind of like a new moon workshop, but I do have a manifestation workshop that you can it's a digital download. And so you can download it. It's only $33. So you go on my website and that will be all in the information. But if you want to put in manifestation and put in some goals out there, you can go ahead and do that. And so let's get started with vision and goals. So initially, when I first came across vision and goals was back when I was working at Lululemon. I worked at Lululemon, I think it was back in 2013 for a couple months. And I've always been somebody who put out this idea of what I want to do. And then I took the steps that needed to be done to get there. And it was very logical, it was very a linear approach. So for example, if I wanted to go on a trip, I figured out, did my research, how much money do I need to save for this trip? How long am I going on the trip? All the details. And then I started inputting a savings plan to get there. And it was very strategic, very logical, putting those goals out there. And it was the same thing when I did my coaching certification back in 2017. Yeah, I did it the year 2017. And it was that same kind of process. What kind of goals would you like to, you put them out there. Okay, the other ways I've done it is that, you look at the goal and go backwards. What are the steps that need to be done, but in a backwards way, so that each step feels, doing the tiny steps, the baby steps, such as a phone call here, a conversation there, putting money aside here, applying for a job there to get to where you're at, doing research, etc. And then that way it felt that goal became more doable. And I do believe that taking the baby steps and not focusing so much sometimes at the end, because we put out goals that are so big sometimes that they do feel overwhelming and they do feel like a lot of work, and you're like, how am I going to get there? So I do think that taking those baby steps and doing it step by step is a good. But where I have changed in the past few years is this logical linear approach. Because what I've learned with the logical linear approach is that you focus on that one road. And the thing is that there is more than one road to get to where you want to go. And I found that when I focus on that one road, I always focus on the end goal and not so much the journey. It was more like, okay, this is the road I need to go to take to get there, because this is my end goal, going on this trip, for example. But I never looked at any other possibilities of how I can get to my end goal in a different way. I never opened myself to it. And then what ended up happening is I would get to that end goal and then I'd be like, okay, what's next? it was almost like it wasn't enough. It was almost, I was always chasing that something else, chasing the thing outside of me, chasing the next goal. And I remember every time I, went on a trip, in the middle of that trip, I would start thinking about my next trip. And it was always thinking about the next thing and not really being present and enjoying the moment. And that's what I realized, like with this version of goal setting, is that it was too rigid and it didn't allow flow. It didn't allow things to come through. It didn't allow to harmonize with the universe. And during these times when I was doing these goal settings, I was in my 20s and I hadn't really done a lot of inner work on myself. And that's where I was at. And there was nothing wrong with that. But I was at a place where I was using outside things to make myself happy. Friends, buying materialistic things, going on trips, going on adventures. And it's not that those things were bad. They were amazing. And I've had amazing experiences. But I was using that to bring the happiness versus like me bringing happiness for myself. And I remember it was, or was it? Around the time I had just moved to Whistler, and it was beginning of the first summer in Whistler. And I did this course. It was like a digital download, and it was a manifestation digital download, 10-day manifestation course. And it was something like $20 at the time. And I did it with these two coaches that I was following that I had met in Whistler. Well, I met one of them in Whistler. I hadn't personally met the other one, but she's pretty awesome too. And I was like, manifestation. I'm like, what is that? I was a little bit confused about it. I was unsure of what it was all about. And I kind of couldn't wrap my head around the idea of putting something out to the universe and then it happens. Like it just sounded like magic. It sounded like, ooh, like make this intention, put out what you want, and then the universe will just make it happen for you. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I started playing around with manifestation. I started playing around with that alongside with my vision and goals. And what I've noticed is that there's a beauty in that, because the vision and goals aspect, like that very linear logical approach, like that is very much like a masculine energy. It's the doing, it's the getting things done. And you don't want to take that away. But the manifestation aspect of like how I was introduced to it, it was very much put it out to the universe and almost like it falls on your lap. And that's more the surrendering process, the feminine aspect. And so all of a sudden, I went from being so rigid to let's see what happens if I don't do anything. And I remember even being in Tofino and just thinking like, you're always manifesting. Honestly, you're always manifesting and saying like, oh, I would love to have these fancy crackers. There's these fancy crackers called the Raincoat Coast Crisp, and these are really good crackers. And they're about like $8-9. That's why I call them fancy crackers. And they're like in a small package, and or even in like, it's not like you get like, like the giant like packs. It's small, and it's just like, but it's so good with any cheeses like goat cheese, brie, all that. And I am also a huge foodie, so love those things. And so I put it out there, and someone once donated it when I was volunteering at the food bank. And I did go to the food bank. Side note, I did go to food bank while I was in Tofino. I was volunteering there, and I did use the services because I was at a place where I was building my business and I didn't have a lot of income stream. And so that was like, a lot of things that I had manifested came from there. I would put it out to the universe, like anything I needed in terms of how I was able to supply my kitchen in Tofino. All my plates, my cutlery, everything was free. Like once I found free glasses on the side of the road and free wine glasses, And I was just putting it out to the universe, and it was just falling on my lap. And I was just kind of like, oh my God, this manifestation thing works. And this is really cool. But then what I started to realize was, when it came to the big things, I was having trouble manifesting. Like when it came to manifesting a client, manifesting a certain money per month, manifesting, partner, the bigger things in my mind, whatever I created in my mind to be big, I found it difficult. I didn't find it came as easily, or it didn't come at the pace that or as fast as like the, fancy crackers. Like the fancy crackers were within a week and so I started to get curious about that. And this is where I realized how powerful the mind is, and what we feel about goals. Like, so if we obviously we desire goals, we have these big goals that we want in life, whether it's that second home, whether it's the the dream job, we have these really big goals. And sometimes if we don't believe it, if we cannot get behind it, it is very hard to bring it into a reality. And so what I started to learn with these manifestations is that I was not believing that I deserved some of the things I was putting out, those big things. And I had to really look within me and look at, why don't I believe I deserve this? Like, why do I not think I'm good enough? Or what other stories am I telling myself? Sometimes we tell ourselves that we need to be at a certain place in certain time to be able to receive something, or that we need to have all these boxes checked off to be able to do something, to get something done. So, for example, you hear this a lot, that if you are an entrepreneur and you hear this, like, oh, you gotta have an email list, you have to have a website, you have to have XYZ, or you have to have had 10 clients before you charge a certain price, or you have to have done, certain criterias for you to be able to have that, client that pays in full, or to be able to have the reputation and the credibility, for example. And there's this parameters, or there's even certain things of, once I get my home, my job, this and that, then I'll be able to have a kid, then I'll be able to go to that vacation, then I'll be able to, take, buy this purse, for example. And we put these parameters in our minds because we think that is a logical and the right way to do things. But is it really right? There is never going to be a right time or a wrong time of when to do a thing. But by putting these parameters, you're telling the universe, like, no, thanks. I don't want this now. And the universe is like, well, we want to give you, don't you want to take this trip? Like, we have it all figured out for you. And you're like, no, I need to make sure I pay off my credit card first. And so this is ways that, like, we end up holding ourselves back. And that when it comes to vision and goals and manifestations, it's a balance of literally everything. It's a balance of putting it out in the universe, trusting, surrendering to it, surrendering to the breadcrumbs that come through to you, like however the universe wants to bring it to you. And then when the breadcrumbs do come, it's up to you to take that action. So this is where taking those actions. So instead of having this like linear, logical approach to making your goals or manifestations happen, it's not so linear. It's more a dance with the universe. So the universe gives you a breadcrumb and you're like, cool, you're going to take action based on that breadcrumb in whatever action feels right for you. And then the universe is like, all right, cool. Like, they're serious. Like, they want this. Okay, like, now let's give another breadcrumb. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to take action to that. And then sometimes to get to that end goal, it doesn't end up being it's linear approach, it might be zigzag all over the place. And sometimes it might come sooner than you anticipated, it might be later, who knows? But you've opened yourself up to that flow. And then who knows what other things can come through. And then also you end up opening yourself to something better. Because that's the other thing, is that we put these manifestations as goals of what we know based on our experiences, what we know based on our like the situation around us. But it's not always necessarily like what is only available. Like everything is available. There's a million and one possibilities. And so this is, again, the universe being like, here, I'm going to give you this amazing thing. Take it. It's way better. And you're like, no, but that's not what I imagined. That's not what it looked like in my mind. And so I'm not going to go for it. And then again, we hold ourselves back. And so it is this dance, and it is also this, what is going on in our body, how we feel about it, what we think about it, what our thoughts are when it comes to these goals. How do we feel in our body? So if you are listening to this podcast right now, and I just want you to think about, what are certain like big dreams you have, certain goals, certain visions, like, is there, think big, like think the stuff that in your mind you're like, this would be amazing, but maybe impossible. Or maybe you feel like there is that possibility, you're like, yeah, but there's that hesitation. And I want you to get curious. I want you to think, okay, what is that one goal you have in mind that would be amazing to have? Like, whether it's a second home, whether it's your dream home, whether it's that dream job, whether it's like $1 million business, whether it's doing a trip around the world for a whole year, whether it's your partner proposing, whatever it is. And there's a few questions to ask yourself, but I want you to start with, like, do you believe it's possible to have it? And really get real with yourself. And do you believe you deserve to have it? And then that's another question to ask yourself. And do you feel like you need to have a planned step by step? Like, have you done your goals in that way in the past recently? And do you feel like in order to get this one done, you feel like you need it to be that way? And ask yourself why. What is the reason for you to wanting to have this step by step plan? What if there was no plan? Would you then believe that you can have it? Does the plan give you the idea that it's possible? These are like few little questions to ask, because that's sometimes like when we plan, it's a sense of control, but control is an illusion, right? So why do you feel like you need to control, and why do you feel like you need the planning is like almost the why does it feel like you need to plan in order for you to believe you can have it? Like, again, you're reaching for that thing outside of yourself to say, okay, this is why I can have it if I plan it. But if I can't plan it, I can't have it. But you can have it if you don't plan it, because the universe is going to give you breadcrumbs, and you're just going to be like responding to those breadcrumbs. So these are a few little things of like how you can play around with the vision and goals. And when you do create goals and manifestations and you put them out to the universe, and if you do take my workshop, you'll see in there I dive on a deeper aspect of like why do you want these manifestations? Why do you want these goals for yourself? And there is a whole process in there that I go through with you. But this episode is just like kind of like a little bit to get you started, to get you curious about yourself, of like, how do you approach vision and goals, and why do you approach it the way you do? Not saying that my way is the right way, not saying that your way is the wrong way. It is more getting curious as to whether it comes from a place of like a true alignment, a place that feels right for you, that you are playing this dance with the universe, or is it coming from a place that you feel you're not good enough, or that you feel that you're trying to control something, or that you feel that you're reaching outside of yourself to create the form of happiness like I did. There's nothing wrong with that. It is just getting curious and then making that decision of how do you want to move forward, making the decision of, do you want to shift it? Do you want to keep it the same? And that is ultimately yours. I'm just offering you a different perspective. I just want you to start questioning you. And by giving you these like tools and these ideas of like how I view vision and goals, how I view manifestation, you can take what resonates and leave the rest. You can take some of it, you can take all of it, you can take none of it and just listen. So if you did really like this episode, please like, share, comment. I would really, really appreciate it. And if you can subscribe, that would be amazing. Like, subscribe to my YouTube, or you can subscribe to my Apple or Spotify podcast. I would love that. And that is it for today. So thank you so much for listening, and I will speak to you all soon. Bye.